If you've ever looked at a place you love and thought, I just don't know how much longer I can hold this together, but you're still showing up anyway, this one is for you. Because Dalby Farm turns 165 years old this year. And the simplest way to say that in a nutshell is we're still here. Hello and welcome back to Barn and Soul, where farming meets heart, history, and the rare and wonderful. I'm Kendall. I have a little cold, and today is a re-entry episode. Not the kind, though, where I will explain where I've been, or honestly, I'm not even going to apologize for being gone for the past couple weeks, because holidays, kids, chaos, say no more. Instead, I'm going to anchor us to something much bigger than my calendar, because in 1861, John Dalby came to Scituate and started what was, at the time, a poultry farm. But when you do the math, that does in fact make 2026 Dalby's 165th year on this land. That simply blows my mind a little bit, because 165 years is not just a long time. That is generations of storms, illness, recovery, economic swings, generations of changing technology, changing expectations, and culture. So, new year, new topic. Today, I want to do two things. I want to zoom out into Scituate history, into what has changed since 1861, and then I want to zoom back into what it actually takes to keep this family farm, or any, maybe, family farm, and a rare breed mission alive here in 2026. Because if you've been listening to Barn and Soul for the last 30 episodes, you already know Dalby isn't just a place to visit. It's a living responsibility. And today I'm going to talk about how responsibility changes over time and how I, my family, people like me, keep choosing it anyway. But before we can get poetic, you know I like to ground us in some fast facts. And these are not vibes. These are real numbers from reputable sources. First up, it's not great. The number of farms in the U.S. has fallen below 2 million. In 2022, it was sitting at around 1.9 million, and that's a 7% decline from 2017. The average age of a U.S. farm producer in 2022 was 58 years. In Massachusetts, Mass Audubon's Losing Ground report documented that between 1985 and 1999, the state lost about 40 acres of open space per day to development. So, and put plainly, over 200,000 acres gone in that period. And in their 2020 edition, they report a long-term pace in more recent years of about 54.8 acres per day that has been converted to development. So it's gone up. Another fact, the Livestock Conservancy's conservation priority list covers more than 180 breeds across 11 species that are considered at risk. And their criteria for critical status can be shockingly small. For example, it can mean fewer than 500 breeding birds in the U.S. and only a handful of primary breeding flocks. So when we talk about the future of farming, we're not talking about a distant abstract thing. We are talking about fewer farmers, older farmers, pressure on land, and breeds that can't just be replaced with a quick online order. That is the context for Dalby turning 165. Okay, zooming out. Scituate, Massachusetts. It's older than all of us. Scituate was settled by Europeans in the early 1600s and then incorporated in 1636. But the area was inhabited by indigenous people, the Wampanoag people, for thousands of years. The name Scituate comes from the Wampanoag term Scituate, often translated as Cold Brook. I've talked about this in a previous episode. But so when John Dalby arrived in 1861, he was not starting something from scratch on what you would call empty land. He was joining a much older human story of people living with the coast, living with storms, living with changing economies. And if you've ever lived on the South Shore, you already know the land and the ocean do not care about your plans. So imagine 1861 for a second. This is Civil War era. It is completely different in the United States. Different everything. And yet, the basic farm truths were almost the same. Animals needed to eat every day. Water did not magically refill itself. Weather dictated mood more than your personality did sometimes. And if you didn't show up, nobody else was going to. Dalby started as a poultry farm, something my family did not uphold. We do not process any animals on our farm. But according to our own farm history, eggs and meat are still sold. Eggs and meat were sold to local merchants for years. I want to highlight something important too, because it ties to 2026 in a very real way. Back then, a local farm supplying local merchants wasn't a brand. It was the infrastructure of daily life. You didn't have to convince people that local mattered. It's just how it worked. Local is local. Those were your resources. Now, in 2026, we're trying to keep farms alive in a world where food is global. Attention is fragmented, and the economics often don't reward care. They reward scale. And that's where the weight comes in. Okay, I never said this was a birthday party, right? We're 165, big deal. But we still have to talk about some stuff that no one would typically want to talk about at a birthday party. And that is that farming has become harder to sustain. Not because people don't love the idea of farms, obviously, but because the numbers and the systems have changed. The USDA's data shows fewer farms now than even 5 years ago. I know of one in Massachusetts, just a bit of a distance from me, but they've been around for 100 years and they're just closing down this year. They can't do it. Rise of water, staffing, and it matters not just for farmers. People have short-sighted views. This matters for communities because farms are not just food, they're land stewardship, their habitat, their local knowledge. And if you're here in Massachusetts, we don't need to pretend this is theoretical. Development pressure is so real. The town I live in is a shadow of itself. Mass Audubon documented decades of open space conversion, tens of acres per day in multiple periods. And that's not just sad. That's a reshaping of what's possible. Because here's what happens when land gets more expensive and more developable. It it becomes harder for farms to expand, harder for farms to stay, and impossible for the next generation to enter without huge resources. And that feeds the other fact we mentioned, which is farmers are getting older. In the 2022 Census of Agriculture, the average producer, as I said, was 58 years old. I want to say something carefully because this could come across as doom and gloom. And my cold, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Older farmers are not the problem, and aging is not a failure. This is not, the problem isn't that we have older farmers. The problem is what happens when the care and knowledge don't get transferred, when there is no pathway for the next generation to learn and no support system for the older generation to keep going. That is when farms disappear. And when farms disappear, we don't just lose a business. We lose relationships with places, nature, habitats, so many things. And if you're listening to this and you're not a farmer, you still might relate to this because the same thing is happening with many trades and skills. A lot of community knowledge, a lot of real world competence. Which brings me to what Dalby is becoming now. Dalby today is not what it was in 1861, and that is okay with me. Our farm evolved. It had to, or it was going to vanish. But the one thing that hasn't changed, even if the animals have, is that Dalby is built on daily care. And the truth, the reason we exist today is because my family keeps showing up. And because, well, we've chosen a mission that is just not an easy one. Endangered heritage breeds are not a cute theme. They're not an aesthetic. They're a responsibility and a privilege, honestly. And they're attached to such incredible history, and they're only going to be here if we're doing this. If the Livestock Conservancy keeps doing this, if that entire network of people keeps going, if the Arapara Island Breeders Association keeps going, there's many groups out there really working hard. Down to people like Four Corners Supply and other refill type stations, even people trying to solve the overconsumption problem. You're all part of this bigger conversation, that responsibility. You're doing that work. Keep at it. I'm over here focusing a little bit on the genetic diversity of our farm animals, but hand in hand, we're making the world a closer vision of its former self, right? We overburdened it with our mass consumption and short-sighted views of our resources. I don't want to make a word salad here. I'm just saying the Livestock Conservancy and groups like that inspire farms like ours because they're tracking what many people don't even realize what is disappearing. And like I said, that's these endangered heritage farm breeds, their history, their relevance, their genetic diversity, the way they could save our food supply should things go off the tracks, should I say. That conservancy, they maintain priority lists. I talk about them all the time, that have more than 180 at-risk breeds spanning across 11 different species. And again, when you look at their criteria, like poultry breeds being considered critical, with fewer than 500 breeding birds, that's a crazy fragile number, guys. Do we understand? I don't know. I feel like I'm screaming into a voice. I mean, I know I am, but it's like a constant self-gaslighting cycle. It feels really important. and I feel I'm just this lone woman screaming into a microphone, locked away in a room, hoping someone will hear her. If the tree falls in the forest and no one's around, did it make a sound? So when you come to Dalby and you meet a rare breed, it doesn't have to be funny looking, by the way, but maybe it is funny looking. Sorry to disappoint the many people that hear rare and expect to be entertained by a odd looking animal. Please try to focus that you're actually still, looks aside, meeting a living thread of agricultural history. A thread that breaks if people stop caring. And that's why I'm saying still here with so much weight. Because, okay, we haven't been focused on this for 165 years. I'll give you that. But we're going on 25 years of this. So yeah, we're still here. We're 165 years young and 25 years strong into this mission. It's a choice we make over and over again. Thanks for being here with me as I ramble about it. Some days are better than others, okay? So why is it harder in 2026? And how are we still optimistic? I'm going to gently name something that I think many farmers and many caregivers, if we're being honest, are feeling. This work is getting heavier. Not because the animals changed. Certainly, honestly, no, not really. But because the world around the animals changed. The tone, the economics are tighter. The expectations are higher. Everybody wants access and content. Everyone wants convenience. But the farm still runs on reality. And on top of that, we're living in a time where people are very anxious. I'm anxious. Animals are anxious. Kids are overstimulated. Adults are exhausted. We're all carrying this invisible load. What does Dalby do with that? You know? Here's the optimistic part, and I mean it. I think farms like Dalby are becoming part of the solution. More important, not less. We're one of the few places left where responsibility is real, care is visible, time slows down, and sorry, not sorry, living beings are not treated like props. And I'll say it plainly. I think the future of this farm depends on one thing: shared stewardship. Not just visiting, and not just casual supporting, but learning how care actually works and participating in it in appropriate ways. And that's why I've been building programs that focus on animal advocacy, not as a buzzword, but as a lived practice. Because if the average age of producers is rising and farms are declining and land is under pressure, then we need pathways for people to learn what farms actually require. It shouldn't be this gate-kept lifestyle. And if rare breeds exist in part because a small number of committed breeders keep them going, we need more of those people now and someday. So my optimism is not even close to everything will be fine. My optimism is we can build the bridge. We will teach kids what care looks like. We can invite families into real stewardship. We can create a culture where caring for animals is not entertainment, it's ethics. And I'm optimistic because I have seen it. I've watched a child's entire nervous system settle down when they're quietly watching animals instead of performing for a screen. I've watched adults soften when they realize an animal doesn't exist for them and their entertainment. And that respect looks and feels like relief. It's a real thing. I think humans and animals are a force together when we stop using each other and maybe start paying attention again. That's the future I want for Dalby. Not louder and not bigger for the sake of bigger. I'm not trying to put a Dalby, store on every corner, or even a Dalby Farm, because I don't think that multiplying the idea makes any sense if the heart and the soul doesn't transfer with it. So we want to be rooted and real and shared. So if and when people who learn and walk down that advocacy pathway with us, when they branch off, they've got it, man. I don't need to put up my own Dalby anything, because they would walk forward with it in their soul. So, yes, if you are local to Dalby, if you are in the South Shore area, I have posted to dalbyfarm.com an advocacy pathway for kids. It is in its baby form, and it will be tweaked as time goes by. It's very exclusive in the sense that 4 spots will be available for any session I run. And I'm starting with children at age 8. I recommend up to 12, at least for this first session. So, if you have an 8 to 12-year-old that you would like to see put on the path of animal advocacy, check out our website, fill out the forms, or, sign up for the intro experience, and let's get started. You don't have to become a long-term member of anything by participating in this intro experience. It's really going to be meant for all ages eventually, but I do need to start sowing seeds and planting the future, and I feel partially responsible for making that happen. Whether it's true or not, that remains to be seen, but I don't see anyone else starting up this kind of thing in my area. And nothing would make me happier than to know that some of the memories and knowledge I instill in young people help inspire their environmentally friendly future in whatever way that could manifest. I just would love to know that I have helped shape the way people make choices, especially if it helps animals. So yes, if you're local and you have an 8 to 12-year-old child that you'd like to see start down this path, hit us up. Go check that out. There's only 4 spots available any given session. This is like as deep dive as it gets. It's personal. They get crazy access that nobody else gets when you visit or come to an event. So that said, real quick, you can still support us even if you don't want to come here, work here, do any of that stuff. You can shop or sponsor, all on dalbyfarm.com. Okay, so yes, it's true. Dalby is 165 years old this year. And the fact that we're still here is not an accident, though sometimes we wonder. I'm kidding. But it's care. It's repetition. It's routine. It's love with and without boundaries at times. But it honestly, mostly, it is showing up on the days when you don't feel so good. And it's loving and reveling in the days when you feel great and optimistic. If you're listening and you've been holding something together, a family, a business, a body, a dream, I just want to say, being still here counts. It counts more than you realize, more than people realize. Don't underestimate the power of showing up. I don't care about your mood, right? Keep your eye on the big picture. Because if we stay too in our heads, if we're second guessing our every micro move, I don't know where that actually leaves anybody. If you're always just here and not, well, zooming out a little bit. And it won't always feel good, and you won't always trust that it's right, and you will screw up. And maybe you are screwing up, or maybe you're caught up on all the things you know you've already done wrong. But one of my favorite random quotes that I honestly don't even know the first time I heard it, I hesitate, but I think it may be biblical, which is not my typical style. But the phrase was, "Only those who have known darkness have seen great light." Thank you for spending this time with me today and for being part of this story, the human story and the animals braided together. Until next time, take care. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, leave a comment, maybe a question I can answer in a future episode. Subscribe to the channel, you know the whole deal. And of course, you can visit dalbyfarm.com. We do ship nationwide. Our country store has something for everybody. So I hope, and please know that all purchases, I believe it's at least 50% of each and every purchase goes directly back to the care and upkeep of this family farm. So we thank you very much. I hope this finds you well, and we'll see you next time. Oh, and don't forget to appreciate the rare and wonderful things in life.